the bookshop, it's the bookshop, it's the bookshop of Beverly Farms.
Howdy, everybody. It's Sam Fightful, your host of John Updike's Ghost, your favorite little podcast about reading, writing, bookstores, literature, non-literature, things that are printed on pages, best of the year lists, and other such things as generated from the very brilliant mind of Hannah Harlow, my co-host, and myself from the very back room of the bookshop of Beverly Farms in this weird week between Christmas and New Year's when Hannah is working and I am not doing anything of value whatsoever. Here we are. How are you doing today, Hannah?
I'm doing well. I am here in the shop. We're seeing some returns. People receive books that they already have or whatnot. And we have people using their gift cards. So
which is an excellent use of your time.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And we are packing up the Christmas specific books.
Put those away
For next year. I put a few holiday cards on sale this week and stuff like that.
You don't do like what Walmart does and make all the Halloween candy half off immediately?
I made some of the holiday cards 50% off.
Oh, wow.
I did.
That's
yes.
a deal.
But I also packed some away because they're good cards and we'll sell them next year.
That's good. I noticed we both are of a mind to make our own holiday cards and send them out to our friends and family. I have noticed we used to be able to cover 3 full doorways with everybody's cards. We are at like 1.5 doorways right now. It is a sad state of affairs. I'm worried this art form is dying.
Yeah, that does seem to be plummeting. We also receive fewer cards than ever before. Though I did get a big stack yesterday when we picked up our mail after being away for a couple of days. So maybe they'll keep trickling in.
I think there might be a rally of New Year's cards. That's true. Also, I wanted to briefly comment on Christmas. I got a stack of books, including books from my sister and my parents, although my mom tried to give one of my books to somebody else. You didn't give me a book?
You didn't give
me a book. The
Geddy
Lee book was not from you?
The Geddy Lee book was me pushing on Mom for you.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that still counts. I wouldn't have got it otherwise. And
then she
father tried to steal it.
Yeah.
She wrapped it and gave it to Dad. And he was like, oh, I don't even know who Geddy Lee is. But anyway, the point of the story is that when you own a bookstore like Hannah does in a way that I apparently don't, you don't get any books because everybody's so terrified of giving Hannah books because she must have all the books already. She owns a bookstore. I sort of own a bookstore and everybody gave me books. So I have a big pile and you do not. I don't know.
Nobody gives me books. I gave myself a book right before Christmas. I gave myself a book called Mistletoe Mayhem, which is a book that was re-released. I guess it was published like 60 years ago. And on the back cover, it was compared to books by Barbara Pym and some other kind of classic mid-century British writers.
That sounds cool.
And I thought, this sounds lovely. It wasn't exactly lovely. I mean, it's set over Christmas. And everyone's kind of awful to each other. So it wasn't
not in a charming way.
I mean, it's charming at times, but it wasn't as happy as I thought it was going to be.
Oh.
But I wanted like a Christmas read.
Right. Well, so next year I am committing to getting you a book for Christmas so that you will not feel left out.
Oh, thanks. That's nice. You're
I'm
going
not
to forget,
sure,
but
well,
I'll remind you.
I'm not going to forget. But so you are going to be hearing about many of the books that I got for Christmas over the course of the next few podcasts. However, today on this last Wednesday before the new year, we're going to talk about our favorite books of the year. So there may be some books that you've heard us talk about in the past, but you've probably forgotten about them because I forgot about them until I went to go look at a big list. But each of us somehow has come up with 12 books.
It was really hard.
Favorite books of the previous year. I would characterize my list as not the best because I read a small fraction of all the books released. But these are books that I would enthusiastically recommend anyone to read who enjoyed reading. I think they might not like it, but you will enjoy the experience, I think.
Do you know about how many books you read this year? Like you picked 12 out of how many do you think you read?
Like 75 this year. I read
Ooh.
last year. Last year was like 52 or 3. This year I was more dedicated and it was more like 75.
I believe I'm at 68 or so.
You listen to them. I don't listen to
I listen to them. And I had trouble. I mean, that number is a little fudged because I also abandon books often.
Oh, no, that includes at least 25 half-read.
Oh, okay.
I
so
didn't
then I'm
finish 75 books.
also closer to 75.
Like I read, a few books. I read like 150 pages. I was like, I get this book, but I don't want to finish it. And
Me too.
I don't have enough time for bad books that I don't want to read.
Exactly.
Not that they're bad, just that I don't want to read.
They're not right. We talk about this all the time. They're just that's not for me. This is for somebody.
So let's talk about our books in some sort of categorized way. I'm not sure what that might be. But for instance, what is like a literary book that you really like that is the sort of thing that people who read like the New York Times review of books or whatever would be like, oh, I want to make sure I read that because I am a literary person.
Okay, well, I have a couple options maybe, but I would say, and this is actually, they think the only book on my list that I haven't talked about on the podcast before.
Oh, you're bringing in new books? Watch out.
It is Blackouts by Justin Torres, which won
lots of big lists. Yeah,
it made lots of lists, and it won the National Book Award for fiction this year.
Oh, that seems important. Yeah.
And so actually, technically, this is one of the books I didn't finish, and not because I didn't love this book. I actually really, really loved this book. It just required the dedication of time to finish it that I didn't have when I was reading it. So I read half of it.
Long or difficult or both?
It's medium long, but it's so interesting. And one of the reasons I loved it was I read Justin Torres's debut novel called We the Animals, which was autobiographical and spare and really short and beautiful. And like, I loved it. And this book, Blackouts, is so different that it made me appreciate him as a writer and as an artist. In this book, there's a lot that's based on like a real history and a real book.
Is there a plot of any kind, or I don't know what it's about. It has an awesome cover, but I literally could not tell you. If someone asked me what it was about, I would say I don't know.
Yeah, so it's a young man in a country south of the United States. I forget. And I read it a while ago, sorry. And they're in this small town, and there's an older man that he is kind of shacked up with, and the older man is kind of dying or is quite ill. But they're having like these quiet days together, and they've discovered this book, and there's like blackout poetry in Blackouts, not the book that they're reading. I didn't realize the Blackouts referred to blackout poetry. There is some throughout the book, and there are photos, and there's the text of the novel. People know what blackout poetry is. We shouldn't describe it, or should we? So it's when you take something that's previously been printed and you black out some of the words, and what's left creates a poem. Yes. Right. Yes. Yeah. Just making sure everybody knows. Yeah. So I just felt like I wanted to think about all the elements and how they were working together. And you did not have the capacity for that at the time you were reading it. I kind of didn't. But I really loved what I read, and I will come back to it. I have done that, and I understand that impulse. My book is, along those lines, is the Daniel Mason book, North Woods. Oh, sure. Also, really hard to get at the end of the year. I guess I hit all these lists. We were telling you it was good. If you were listening to this little podcast, we were telling you it's good. You were on top of things on this one. I think it's literary in the, just in the construction. It's, as I've said before, it just is oriented in this interesting way where the place is the main character, and you don't get that for a while. And I kind of think you're at a disadvantage if someone has told you that, because I think part of
the delight of the book is figuring out who the main character is. And you're like, why do I care about this person? Who cares about this new person? And you realize it's all about how they're interacting with this place, and the place itself in its passivity is a character.
Right.
It's super cool.
Well,
So
and what I understand is,
ruin it. I don't know.
As you go through time, the way he's writing is reflective of that time period. So he's like writing a letter from the 17th century in that the language you would expect or whatever, and that he does that all really well, kind of like
he does
each time period.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's that didn't delight me as much, because they were all from characters, and like that was sort of required for what he was trying to do.
Okay.
So that was not as interesting, because I feel like that's like I'm just in Ministry of Time, which we're not going to talk about right now. They do that.
We're totally going to talk about that next year, though. I'm so excited.
Yeah, no, it's a great book. I just finished it, but I think that happens a lot. Like these sort of epistolary novels can be popular, where we're getting all these different missives from people. I thought they were cool, that they were more like found objects than they were. It was like a speech that this guy gave to a geological society. I don't know. Anyway, I was totally ready for it when I got to it. So a similar one, I think, is Lauren Groff's Vaster Wilds. I think is also literary.
You'd put that on your top list, top of the year.
Yeah, I've been going back and forth about it. Like when I first read it, I feel like I didn't really. It took me a while, maybe even a whole period of time thinking about it after I read it, to really get what it was trying to do and sort of reorient my opinion of it and my enjoyment of it. When I was reading it, I thought it was more going to be like adventure novel, like, whether, it's about this girl in the woods who's surviving in, colonial era North America. And I really thought I was so trained in sort of genre that I was focused on her survival or not survival.
Right.
And it's just not the point. Whether she lives or dies or what happens to her in some ways is not what I'm supposed to care about. And so when I go back and think about, it's much more about, it's like watching a movie that a time traveler managed to take on a V8 recorder or whatever, and then deliver to you. I don't know.
Our mother loved that book, she told me.
Oh, yeah,
so but it's funny, you engage with novels, and I love this so deeply. I think that it's not always obvious to me that you loved a book. So when we talked about the Vaster Wilds on the pod, and even North Woods, I didn't walk away being like, oh, Sam loved that book. I was like, oh, Sam appreciated that book and he engaged with it and whatever. So I love hearing your favorites of the year. I think it's really interesting.
But I think that's true. I think what I love about a book is that it challenges me in some way.
Right. And that is totally fair.
Just, titillating enjoyment.
Yeah. I want to add another literary.
Yeah. Do you have another literary one?
I'm going to say Day's Work by Chris Batchelor and Jennifer Hable.
Oh, yeah. The Melville book.
And I think, again, when I read it, I thought, I love parts of this and this is really interesting. But the more space I get from it, the more I appreciate it, because it's continued to make me think about, what is a novel and what was it trying to do. And, it was a little opaque sometimes. There was so much Melville facts. And then the book's like, this is a novel of a marriage. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
So it's written by both halves of the couple. Is it clear? He wrote this and she wrote that?
No, because it's only she's the main character. The wife in the story is the main character. And you don't have a husband's perspective. Right. You get dialogue from him and stuff.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's interesting. I do wonder how you write a book together in that way.
Collaborate on it, adding here and there. I would be super interested in their process, though.
Yeah.
who generates the copy first, if they generate it in parallel. Super interesting.
Yes.
Another literary book, I think, that is more sort of, I don't know, at least in like, I think there's literary, like I am writing to impress you with the writing and you're going to engage with it on multiple levels. And then there's writing that I think literary that's trying to comment on our current time period.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Rachel Connolly's Lazy City is trying to do that.
Sure.
And I don't read a lot of this, so I'm not actually saying that like I didn't like think Lazy City was like a super impressive book, but I liked it, and I also liked that it was like right now, and was commenting on what it is like to be in the mid-20s right now, you know, looking at what our future is offering us, and in a literary way that wasn't plot driven, that, you know, just sort of started and ended and gave me like this view. And I feel like there isn't a lot of that right now. I feel like most of our literary stuff is sort of set in the past to comment on now, or set in the future to comment now, but like something that's like, that feels like it could have happened yesterday, I don't read a lot of. So I would encourage people, maybe there's other stuff like that that I don't know about.
Yeah. I was trying to think if I have anything.
Well, I don't
like
think you
that.
like that much, but like that Emma Klein book, I feel like is trying something similar.
I really
like
didn't
that.
love that. And I think a lot of people, because it's just super dark, and then the ending is disappointing. I mean,
Right.
So.
And that was what was cool about Lazy City, is that it was dark, but it didn't feel like it was trying to be dark on purpose. You know, it's just like, yeah, it's kind of shitty being in this situation right now.
One of the books I have on my list is Amazing Grace Adams by Fran Littlewood.
Oh, yeah.
And that is, I was trying to think of what year that's in. I think they tell us, but that seems pretty right now. And it seems pretty right now for what it's like to be a middle-aged woman or whatever.
I think that's kind of similar. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I found it super funny and relatable and shocking and over the top. But I did have a hard time like wholeheartedly recommending it, because there's like a reveal 3/4 of the way through the book that is like so shocking that for someone who maybe went through that.
Oh, yeah, you were saying that, yeah.
That it's hard. You just don't know. You know, it's like, you know, I don't really love
by the way, has
warnings.
this traumatic thing happened to you? Because if it has, you should not read this book. You shouldn't read
this book. But if I tell you, then I've ruined the book. So,
and also me just asking that question could be traumatic for you.
Right,
so.
Exactly. So that was actually, it was unfortunately a tougher sell than I wanted it to be.
Well, I think that's a very hard thing to grapple with, like, you know, these trigger warnings and whatnot, because, you know, there's just no way to know all of the things that maybe bad happen to all of the people. And I think if you're reading literature, I think you're committing to sort of maybe having that happen to you. Like, that's just the way it is. I don't know. But okay. So, you know, also along those similar lines, I do want to put a shout out to Sam, which was in January at the very beginning of the year. Allegra Goodman's book set in Beverly, and really
now out in paperback, actually.
Just about. You should. I mean, it's just such a great story of contemporary girlhood, and I just think it was, you know, that actually was a example of that evolving interior voice in a way that I was really impressed with, where as Sam aged, we got this more sophisticated sort of narration, which I thought was really well done.
Like, even though you start when Sam is quite young, it wasn't like this cheesy child's voice.
No.
It was just a little bit less sophisticated, you know, just simpler or whatever.
Right. I've said it many times, I'm not sure on this podcast, but one time, Field, my banjo player who does not have kids, said to me, I've met a ton of kids and they are almost always the same at 2 as they are at 20. And I thought that was like a really good example of it, is that their sort of orientation and voice was the same.
Yeah.
It just sort of evolved in its ability to express itself. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense to me. So I'm going to move ever so slightly into genre.
Okay.
So start thinking about your genre.
I'm going to. Also, I have to get a pen to cross off what I've already talked about so I can see Now I have it. I've got it.
So we were talking about how some books, to comment on contemporary times, take place in the near future. And people have been commenting to me in the shop at like, is this a thing? It seems like so many books are set in like just the very near future, as opposed to like, that's not dystopian or whatever. Right.
It's just like, hey, we have a little extra tech here.
Yeah, it's a little dystopian, which I would call Chain Gang All-Stars.
It's only a little dystopian. I think that's pretty full-on dystopian myself.
Pretty bad. Yeah, it's just dystopian.
Yeah. Hey, everybody's watching people murder each other on TV. I think
it's so entertaining.
A little bit beyond your standard kickboxing.
Yeah, I think. I don't know if this counts as genre, but I'm going to put it in there, I guess.
What, Chain Gang All-Stars? Is it genre? Yeah. I think it's genre. I do think it's genre because I think it's dystopian fiction for sure.
Okay, so that was one of my favorites of the year. Technically, I read it last year, but that's okay. It just came out in May.
No, I think that's whether you have any issues like with it structurally or whatever. I do think it's one of the most important books that was released this year. Like I think it
totally
challenged its readers and tried to say something.
Right, and I loved it for that. Like it had a very clear point of view, and it was fiction that we can also say it had politics. And I just love how wholeheartedly it went after it honored its beliefs, the author's beliefs.
Yeah, it was in your face and challenged you to disagree. Like, do you think this is okay? Because it seems like you think this is okay. And I thought that was great. Yeah. I could have used with just like, I would have dialed it, back down to 8 and it was at 11, but that's
too violent, you mean? Or
too like
or just too obvious
in what it was trying to do. Like I would have like just a touch more subtlety, Okay. Which is hard to pull off.
It is.
Okay. Let's see. So I guess genre. So I guess I would put Naomi Alderman's The Future in that exact same category where it is recognizably our universe and it's making sort of a prediction about how it goes. And I do think the sort of message is similar. We are currently doing crazy, immoral shit. If we don't stop it, it will end up like this. And I think Naomi Alderman did some really interesting stuff in the mining of Bible verse, but also in the understanding of how online communities work. Like, there is a whole class of people, and I definitely count myself among them, who are online all the time and know about communities and way of communicating that are just completely and totally opaque to people who don't spend all day on a computer. And I think probably you're even one of them. Like, I don't think you are even remotely as online as I am because you actually...
Not anymore.
Yeah, I mean...
I used to be.
At a desk, but now, like, you talk to people. Like, I talk to so many fewer people in real life than you do. And I think the way that people communicate with each other online is super interesting. And the way that she blends those like online relationships into real world relationships and community building is super interesting and just a great storyteller. Like so hard to pull off like, oh, we're going to talk about crazy Bible verse interpretation and, building underground bunkers and car chases and robots and, to pull it all off and have it actually be like a page turner, like I cannot put it down, is just so like the craftsmanship also is incredible.
Yeah. You're making me think of this book, which I didn't have on my list, but probably should have. And that's Yellowface by R.F. Kuang.
Oh, very controversial book, Yellowface.
I know.
It's just
but the way
terrible. Oh, it's so clumsy, like a 9th grader who just discovered feminism for the first time.
But the thing is, I could not put that book down, at least the first half of it. like it was such a page turner.
Really? Yeah, I actually did not know that about the book.
Yeah, and
The same thing with Babel. I could not put Babel down, and people just bitch about that.
That's why I think she's not an amazing like sentence level writer or whatever, but she knows how to keep you turning the pages.
There's something about her pacing that I think is really good.
It's really good. And reading that book, I fully appreciated the amount the character spent on Twitter and how Twitter affected her life. Because I used to just be on Twitter all day long.
That's a good example of what I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was in my old job and sitting at a desk all day, and I just constantly had Twitter open. And so it totally made sense to me that this character, was just driven crazy by Twitter. And like when she got attacked on Twitter, like that was like the end of her life. And I wondered how many people reading that book who didn't really live on Twitter.
It doesn't have the same emotional impact.
Does everyone understand this?
100%.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people criticize that book, and I think a lot of it is just the emotional nuance that's being conveyed if you get like what a career killer that is, or like in some ways, like whatever who's the woman that just like had the review bombing incident, lost her book deal and all that sort of stuff. Like I had never heard of her in
know who she is actually,
but all of a sudden like everybody knew this woman,
and then her life was like over.
But it's going to come back huge. She's going to like publish like a book about being canceled and like make $1 million. Right?
I mean, it's amazing.
It feels so meta. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Like I feel like she nailed it because I was like, this shit happens and people don't get it.
Right. And I think there was so much that was, yes, obvious. But when you get into what appropriation is, it did get more complicated as you went. Like, the initial stuff was super obvious of like, yeah, that's bad. You can't do that. But it wasn't always obvious,
Yeah. So a similar book along those same lines is that Museum of Human History book.
Yes.
By Rebecca Bergman. Right. Again, this sort of future, maybe universe, like everything is recognizably us, but is not anywhere specific.
Well, I liked your comparison to Murakami because, you're in like a Murakami world and you're like, this is kind of.
Right. But which rules are we allowed to break here? Like, okay, this girl just slept for 20 years and didn't age. Like, what else could be different and wrong? But it's sort of in a similar way, had a lot of very obvious, like, I am commenting on society right now pieces. Like, this is about the opioid industry. But it still made you think about how we deal with indigenous populations and how we exploit them and how we allow ourselves to be the beneficiaries of those exploitations. And, like just because something is obviously societal commentary doesn't mean it's not well done. Right. Like, we're engaging in the conversation, and as long as it's not clumsy, I want to see where it goes. And that's where with Rebecca Bergman, I just didn't know where it was going at all. I was like, what the hell is happening? What am I supposed to worry about? Like, and I just think that is really fun, which
sounds awesome.
are important.
So my other genre book is not like any of the others we've done. And I'm going to put The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young on my list.
Oh yeah, time travel. That counts.
Because it was time. It was it was fun in the sense that I got to a point where I was thinking about the book when I wasn't listening to it. And I thought, I need to get back to this book because I want to figure out how this happens. I don't understand like where it's going and how it's all going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
So just
it was satisfying.
It was satisfying. Yes.
I think it's very hard to be satisfied at the end of a time travel book. Yet another glimpse into the future. I was very unsatisfied by how Ministry of Time finished with its time travelness. Like I was like, oh, come on.
Yeah, we're to be discussed.
To be discussed. Let's see. Do I have another genre book? Oh, kind of similar is T.C. Boyle's Blue Skies, which I want to give a shout out to. Like, I don't know
about that one.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I feel like T.C. Boyle is one of these like super famous authors with 1 million books, and we sometimes forget about him. I thought that book was great cultural commentary. And again, it was sort of in the near future as a climate disaster book. And it is kind of genre. I think it's because it's a climate disaster genre book. And I thought that book was really funny. And I don't, I think books don't often enough I don't think he's trying to be literary necessarily, but he's definitely like in the literary tradition of like the Richard Russos and those guys. And like, it's funny. Like, I laugh out loud. I actually laughed out loud at the Richard Ford book and the Richard Russo book. But I just think we don't value that enough. Like, we can be talking about important things and also have fun.
Yeah. I have a funny book.
Oh yeah? What's your funny book?
Which I would maybe put, I don't like what category, like, is this women's fiction? I don't know. Like, I hate that category, obviously.
Women's fiction.
But
Books for girls.
It's The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue.
Oh, we have that upstairs. You like that? I can't remember that.
Yeah, I really liked it. And part of the reason I liked it was funny. Like, I was laughing out loud. I was reading it when I flew to Paris in the spring.
What happens in that book again?
So it takes place over the course of a summer in Ireland in like the 80s or the 90s, early 90s. It's like economically depressed times.
Mm-hmm.
And these two kids have just finished college, and they meet when they're working in a bookstore, and they become best friends. It's like,
it's a bookstore book.
Well, it starts as a bookstore book, and then I don't know, one of them loses their job, and then like there's an affair with the English teacher, so they become roommates, and one's a gay guy who starts having an affair with her married English teacher.
Right.
And then she starts working for her English teacher's wife, who works for a publisher. So she's like interning for the summer.
And a series of unfortunate events happen.
Yes, and it's hilarious.
I like the setup. Yeah, I remember that.
It's like falling in love with a friend, and then they each are also falling in love, with other people, like with romantically.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like first loves, know.
I like that. Similarly funny book is that Impossible Fortress book that you gave me by Jason Recolak. You gave it to me for my birthday. It's the weird book you bought in a bookstore somewhere. It's like a British edition of it or whatever.
Like the 80s or something, the 90s?
Some of our first loves in the 80s. Actually has a great little weird turn that I saw coming, but I was like, is that? And I definitely didn't see it coming right at the jump. And I've actually recommended it to quite a few people on Reddit because people often ask for like 80s nostalgia books, and it's a
people often ask.
People my age like 80s nostalgia books, 90s nostalgia books. And it's great, like for video game nerds and, people who had a Commodore 64. That book is super funny and like reminds you of all your loser friends when you were that age. It's great.
Cool. I have one last women's fiction book.
I have 4 books left.
I have a bunch of books left.
Oh, okay.
But in this like nebulous genre we're in, it's not funny necessarily. Oh. It's Summer Stage by Meg Mitchell-Moore.
Oh, that's genre-y. Yep, sure. But a different genre.
Summer reading, we're calling this? I don't know.
Beach reads.
Beach read.
Beach read.
It was, I just, again, the more I think about it, the more I appreciate it, because it's one of these books where it's super satisfying. Again, very satisfying. Mm. And nothing like too terrible happens, right? So you're not like down in the dumps.
Yeah.
People have kind of smaller problems, but like very relatable problems.
Lower stakes. Yes.
Yeah. And then there are like a bunch of different storylines. You have a bunch of different characters, and everything just gets tied up in the end in like a very satisfying way.
I like it. Satisfying book that gets tied up in the end. This one is a little bit genre. I want to throw another shout out to J.D. O'Brien, Massachusetts writer, and who wrote Zigzag, my favorite weed novel of the year. Which for the same reason, it's so fun. It is so fun. If you like Westerns and like Hunter S. Thompson and just like, there aren't enough books about just riding around, listening to music, doing drugs. And this one is perfect for that. And also has like a Western and a bit of a mystery and a little shoot 'em up at the end. And it's funny. And it's just very human. I think he does a great job of writing about humans that most of society writes off as being like dumb stoners, but they're people too.
Yeah.
And I love that book. And I know it's very unlikely that anybody sees that on anybody's top 10 list.
Probably not.
And
Yeah.
I just thought it was great. And he
Awesome.
deserves. Plus, he reached out and found me and was like, read this book. And, it's so rare that some rando author reaches out to you and says, read my book, and then you actually love it. So,
yes, totally. Very rare.
I think, not that she was Rambo, but the Rebecca Bergman was her reaching out to us too, I think, right?
So she did reach out. She dropped off a galley at the store and she said, I have family in the area. And I said, I know, because they've already pre-ordered your book. So I was already predisposed to like her because we'd already made some money off the book. And she was just cool about it. And so then I think I handed it to you.
Just like JD. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What about YA books? Or do you have another that builds up that?
No. I have a bunch of historical fiction. But I don't have any YA
okay,
on my list.
I've got a historical fiction. Do historical fiction.
Okay. I have 3. So I'm just going to pick one. I know. Wow. Right.
I have 2 more books to talk.
I think
3 more
I have to say Absolution by Alice McDermott.
Right.
Because I've loved it. I've been recommending it like crazy in the store. I don't know if everyone else loved it as much as I did, but I know Ann Patchett did, so I feel okay about it.
Why? Is it not getting good buzz or what?
Well, no, I just had a couple people come back and say, oh, that was actually too political for me. And I was like, oh, geez.
What's the political part? What's political about it?
So it's, a Vietnam book set in 1963 in Saigon, and it is talking about the experiences of the wives.
Right.
And so
they thought it was too feminist or something?
Well, so the wives are doing charity work, and then it's, sort of questioning like when we are quote unquote helping people.
Oh, it's like an indigenous population encounter kind of politics.
Right.
Are there some people that think we did good work in Vietnam?
So I guess
that's kind of universally understood as a giant shank on the United States' part.
Right.
There's some people holding on to like we were the good guys there.
Some people are always holding on to we were always the good guys.
Yeah, we're always the good guys. Yeah.
So that was interesting.
Well,
to hear that.
That's a good reaction.
I thought it was just genuinely a well-written and a good story that worked on a couple different levels.
Yeah, good. What else you got?
Oh, I also have The Square of Sevens by Laura Shepard Robinson.
Oh, yeah. The tarot reader.
It's just because there were lots of twists and turns. Like you kept thinking, I know what's happening. And then it was like twist and then twist and then twist. Like they just kept coming. So it was a little long. Like you had to commit. But I found it very enjoyable. And then in the end, I didn't see the end coming.
And that's what, 1800s England, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 19th century England. And I think we talked at the same time that you read The Fraud, because you were like, oh, this sounds really similar to Zadie Smith, because it was like someone trying to get the fortune, the inheritance that was rightfully hers.
Yeah. You'll notice the Zadie Smith, no shade on Zadie, not on my top 12. I mean, we had to pick, we didn't have to pick any number, but I just think if you are a big Zadie Smith fan, I think me being like, oh, you need to read this is just disingenuous. Like, I think she's at the point in her career where completists should absolutely read it. But like, if you're not some big Zadie Smith fan, I think you can invest your time in different books and be more delighted.
Right. I was, again, talking to our mother about this book who found it, what was she saying? That it was just sometimes hard to stay invested in it.
There's times where, and maybe she's trying to challenge the reader, and I have full confidence that she's doing stuff on purpose. There were times where it just seemed like needlessly confusing. Like it took a long time to figure out where I was in the world and who was talking and
that's what she said.
Care. Like, I was like,
where am I
who the
now?
hell is this guy? Yeah. Like, oh, now we're in the Caribbean. What happened? Okay, all right, I'll get it. And it just felt sometimes like. I don't know. It was hard. Just fucking hard.
Which made me surprised, having talked to you about the book, extensively, to see it on the New York Times 10 best of the year list.
I won't comment on why you might put it there for political reasons. Like I don't object to that. Like I don't think you're being a jerk if you do that. Like I just think I don't know. I think if you read a lot of books this year and you thought that was like one of the 10 best ones you read, I would like to know what other 60 books you read.
Right. Okay. So the one I really did enjoy also that's historical fiction is The Midnight News by Joe Baker. And that was a World War II.
Yeah, that was early in the year, I feel like.
That was early in the year. And what I liked about it was how unmoored you sort of felt throughout, because the main character, is she has like PTSD. She's got these mental health issues, and so you never really knew what was real. And it becomes clear as you go towards the end, like this was real and this wasn't real and this was, but it was very well done.
Right. Yeah, I hand sold that a couple of times because it's easy to tell people what it's about.
Yeah. Right.
And also it was kind of short, right? It's like a 200-page novel or something.
Yes, it is.
It felt like very digestible.
Yes, exactly.
The only real historical novel I had was R.I.P. Russell Banks, his last novel. I did read Magic Kingdom right at the beginning of 2023. And I thought so this is one of these books, like, I don't know whether I liked it 100%, but I have talked about it with other people like 15 times randomly because I learned so much from it. It's just such a cool, like, especially up here in New Gloucester where we have the Shakers. Like, people talk about the Shakers all the time. And I was like, I know a shitload about the Shakers now. We were talking about it. Actually, we talked about it on Christmas Day.
We talked about it on Christmas Day,
the Shakers and the Quakers. And, it's just it's such an interesting, like, cultural phenomenon that people would gather themselves in this way and try to make a life in that way and interpret, like, meaning of life in the way that they do. And then just to have it be like this casualty of American capitalism, like, is also so interesting. Like, the Shakers basically just got wiped out by human progress. Like, it just didn't make sense anymore what they were doing, and now it's Disneyland.
Right. I mean,
actually,
some people
Disney
are like,
World, I should say Disney World.
Disney World. But I'm sure some people are like, "What are you talking about?" But so it's the story of how the Shakers had this land down in Orlando.
Back then, the Floridian government would give you 10 acres of land for free if you would come down and farm it, because they were just looking for people. And they had all this swampland, and it was sort of easily convertible into farmland if you would do the work of carving out the waterways and drying out the places in between. And so the Shakers were like, "Oh, free land, yeah, let's go." And they came down and they made this beautiful working farm. And then it all collapsed because Shakerism just doesn't
sustainable,
really make a lot of sense to anybody.
They don't procreate.
You can't reproduce, and it's like voluntary, weird celibacy, and you're not even a priest; you're just a person. And
so then they sold their land.
So then they became the remaining Shaker became like a land prospector, real estate agent, and like sold all the land to what would become the Disney Corporation, and now it's the Magic Kingdom. And so it's just like the way that it starts way back. It's like you have a native population, and they abandon it because it was just a shitty place to live, and then some white guys were like, "Oh, we should try to live here," and all the indigenous people are like, "We told you this place sucks.
Good luck to you." So I actually have two more on my list.
Me too.
Because I felt like I should have some nonfiction. So I thought, what are my favorite nonfiction?
Oh, I have not. Sorry.
Oh, what do you have?
No, I said I have not. I don't have a single nonfiction book on mine.
Right. What's your last categories?
Oh, last category is YA. I have 2 YA.
Okay. Well, so I'll go quick.
You do, yeah.
The Art Thief by Michael Finkel.
Yeah. That's a great book. Yes.
Super fun and just like jaw-dropping facts, and I love finding other people who have read it, and you can just be like, and then can you believe
Can't believe this happened?
And then my other one is We Are Too Many by Hannah Pittard, which is a memoir about her divorce.
Oh,
which
yeah.
was super like writerly, because I think he was a writer too, maybe, I can't remember, but it's told mostly in dialogue, and so I just thought I appreciated what she was trying to do, just something a little different and tackling like a topic that's seemingly common. It's like common, right? Divorce, but like also devastating in many ways. And
yeah, just because it's commonplace doesn't mean it doesn't hurt the people involved quite a bit.
Exactly.
I have two YA books similarly. First, The Warrior Girl Unearthed by Angeline Boulet came out this year. I
love that.
I think, when YA succeeds nowadays, it gives us, or gives the reader, sometimes you have this insight already if you're a little older, but it gives a young reader insight into how people live their lives that they wouldn't get otherwise. So, introduces them to a population or an idea or an experience, right? And helps them figure out how they'll process that experience in the future. And I think YA just got so far down the road of, like people murdering each other or whatever that it's a lot of that. It's trying to figure it out, right? Like almost everything is just like basically fantasy of, hey, I've got a superpower and everybody's dying. And it's like, well, we don't have to do that. And Warrior Girl Unearthed is, it introduced me to much better understanding of what is done with indigenous remains and how they're treated as, sort of artifacts of history when, hey, you know what? There are actual living people who are indigenous and can trace their history back 10,000 years, and we treat them as though they're all gone. And it's just like this idea of a population that is almost invisible to their neighbors, I think is super interesting. I learned a lot from it. And then I thought Sugaring Off was a really great piece of YA because it did give, as, clumsy at times as I thought it may have been about the sort of, limited hearing community. I thought it was better, like, every kid has a problem, right? So I think the hearing issue stood in for any different making thing, right? And we all, as teenagers, have something that we're worried about, makes us so different from everybody else, makes it impossible for us to live our lives and whatever. And then, how that interacts with just, falling in love with dangerous things and people and why they're so attractive and why we set really good situations on fire for no good reason because we're so scared of success and we're so scared of what we'll do with, people who actually care about us. And I just thought, again, like I thought she didn't have to go as big as she did at the end. She could have kept the stakes lower and it would have worked just as well. But you do get some shoot 'em up at the end, if you like that kind of thing.
Yeah, yes. What I was going to say about Warrior Girl Unearthed, one just element that I loved was how when you have a book that shows you people breaking the law or doing something seemingly wrong, quote unquote wrong,
right?
But you just like
you're rooting for them.
You're rooting for them, and the main character in that book, like she's like their heist is like, well, no, you really shouldn't do that. But then you're like, no,
a bad plan,
right? Bad plan.
Give it a shot. I don't know.
Yeah,
and it is a bad plan. It goes bad. Everything goes bad.
Yes.
But I love that you don't actually often get like knowledge in the moment as you're reading that this is a really bad plan and then watch it go to shit and then they have to clean it up. And, there is no like superhero that saves in, it's just bad.
Yeah. And you are rooting for them. You're like, you have very good reasons for doing this bad thing.
Yeah. Give it a go. Yeah. No, it's, I said this the other day, like, I don't know how you draw the appropriate line, but we always finish our Grassholes shows with John Hardy, which is about a guy who wore 6 guns every day and shot a man down on the West Virginia line. And by the end of the song, I think you're rooting for John Hardy. And it's like, sometimes you got to make bad decisions and see what happens,
Yeah. You're also reminding me of this book I just read, which I wasn't really going to talk about in the pod. It's like kind of a weird book to talk about because it's written by this guy I went to grad school with.
Oh.
I was telling you about it. It's called Molly by Blake Butler.
Yeah.
And his wife committed suicide. So it's kind of the story of that. But it's really fascinating from a psychological point of view because you see them. Like
Wait, it's fiction or nonfiction?
No, it's nonfiction. It's a memoir.
He wrote a memoir about his wife killing herself?
Yeah.
I
know it's brutal.
Yeah. I don't know if I could read that.
But you see her and him sometimes like behaving in these really questionable ways. And she had this traumatic upbringing. And you just see it manifesting itself. Like, people making bad decisions and doing bad things. And they're not bad people. They just bad things happen to them.
I know. Well, that's really high note to finish on there, Hannah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Do you have any other books?
Nope.
I don't have it. That's my 12. I talked about all my 12. You talked about all your 12.
I talked about maybe even more than 12.
Yeah, we talked about a lot.
I kept adding more books.
It's going to be a mess underneath the. As you will recall, if you go and find this podcast on our website, John Updike's Ghost, you go to bookshop@beverlyfarms.com and you will look on cool stuff. You will see it, or just on our homepage, you'll see it. And you'll see under every episode a list of every book we talk about, and you can click on them and order them if you wanted to read them for your own self. If you have great books that you read this year that you think we should read and talk about, that you think we missed out on, please email us at staff@bookshop@beverlyfarms.com, and that will come to us. Or Hannah, anyway. Sometimes she gets messages from me that she doesn't send along, and that's, whatever. But,
no
just
comment.
pretends like I saw them. And
a lot. There's a lot going on.
And anyway, we really appreciate everybody listening over the course of 2023. We had a great year of reading. As you can hear, we had too many books to even talk about. And it's true. For as grumpy as I sometimes feel about books, I was looking through this. I was like, I loved a lot of these books. I'm really glad that I read them. So hopefully you had a great year of reading yourself, and that you and your friends and family are all safe and happy and warm here, coming up on the new year.
And we also I've already read books I'm really excited about that are coming out in 2024. So we already have things we're excited to talk about next year.
We are cooking. One of them comes out in May, so we're laying serious groundwork.
Gotta start early.
All right. So thanks everyone. We hope you have a happy new year, and we will see you next year.
Happy New Year.
Bye.